Perfect. Can I have somebody just confirm with me that you can see my screen in slideshow, please?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session on the Student Supervisor Agreement. I'm Veena Singaram from the School of Clinical Medicine, and I'm hoping that this afternoon, actually, my aim for today's session is actually to help you to either strengthen your relationship with your student or your supervisor, or also start off the relationship on a note where you can lead to a much more productive, nourishing relationship. So one of the things is about the student-supervisor relationship. It's really important to have clear expectations. It's actually a very important relationship that the university is also very vested in, because this relationship determines the success of the student, right, and the completion of the project. And so therefore, if you actually, and as I was chatting to some of the colleagues before we started, in the different institutions, almost every institution has an agreement in place. It's either an MOU or a contract that a student and supervisor must sign. At UKZN, it's a compulsory part of the process as well. And in order for you to submit your protocol and your ethics application, your MOU, or the student supervisor contract must be signed and submitted together with that. If that's not submitted, then we can't actually forward your application to ethics. That's how seriously we take that contract. But what I'm very aware of is that it's not like I'm not guilty of it either at some stage or the other, being a student or a supervisor. We often just sign these things without actually interrogating what it means, or for that matter, having a dialogue with our students or our supervisor as to what is actually in that contract. So I start off by asking you this question: is a supervisor a mentor? And perhaps if you want to just add your answers in the chat, and I'll look to see what your responses are. So if you can just quickly jot down, is the supervisor a mentor? Do you consider your supervisor to be a mentor, or do you think all supervisors are mentors? Anybody wants to share? Okay, I'm not seeing any responses in the chat. Let me see if we can ask. Okay, thank you, Vuyo. You are saying yes. Does anybody disagree with Vuyo? Okay, Zaniela, thank you. Yes, supervisor is also a mentor. And Kushle says absolutely. Shamina says yes. Okay, does anybody have feels otherwise? Thank you, Lenine. Okay, so Lenine has just shared with us, I hope I'm saying that right, Lenine, has just shared with us that I think a supervisor can be a mentor, but doesn't have to be. And that is absolutely correct. So for example, all those of you that were very set on the fact that yes, supervisors are mentors, here is an example of an expectation that you have of your supervisor. And then when that does not actually come to be, that is a point of conflict and can cause huge amounts of discordance in the relationship, and actually sometimes even lead to lots of conflict in the supervision relationship. So this is very important to remember. A supervisor can be a mentor, but not all supervisors are mentors. So the relationship is very different. The supervision relationship is different from a mentorship. But yes, for some of us, like myself, I consider it to be an integral component of being a supervisor. But then I can think back to having a supervisor once who was very vested and was a really good supervisor, but kept everything very professional, all our interactions, etc. And he was very vested in my professional development. So yes, of course, he played a nurturing role in my professional development, helped me to clarify my thinking, and get my project going. But he was not one who, when I was going through some difficulty or wanted to actually invest in my personal development or my personal struggles and challenges, he actually felt it should be separated. And in that case of there, it wasn't like so he was a bad supervisor, but it's very important for us to have a clear expectation of what the supervision relationship is. So remember that a supervisor can be a mentor, but not all supervisors are mentors. So one of the like that now, having expectations that are probably not in line with what your supervisor thinks the supervision relationship ought to be leads to a break in communication. And what we find is that a lot of the times when there are issues, and I often get this when I get students coming to say to me, can I change my supervisor? And sadly enough, I've recently had one incident where a student was asking me to do this at a really late stage, like just before they can submit their thesis. And I'm like, how can that be possible at this late stage to have such conflict? But personality differences, ineffective supervisions, breaking communication can all lead to difficulties. And we'll talk a little bit about conflict resolution, but not too much. But just to let you know that these things can go wrong. And especially in a doctoral journey, a supervision relationship is very much a long-term relationship. I mean, sometimes it lasts from 5 to 7 years or even longer, depending on the journey that one is on and how things may work out. But unlike a romantic relationship or a marriage where they often say that expectations lead to disappointments, in a supervision relationship, it is very good to have very clear expectations of that relationship. So what do you expect from a supervisor-student relationship? So I'm going to start us off with like a little bit of a exercise. And then let me ask, is anybody in the audience who is a supervisor? Let me just quickly see if I can see you guys. Okay, I'm not sure who was trying to, is it Monica? Were you trying to say something? Shamila. Is that a thumbs up for being a supervisor? Or Lenine, are you saying you're a supervisor?
Yes.
Okay, awesome stuff. So Lenine, you're going to be the supervisor today. Thanks, Daniela. We'll use Lenine for the first bit, and I'll come back to you. Okay, so who wants to be a student? Who's a doctoral student? Let me see. Anybody wants to be the doctoral student while Lenine is the supervisor? We're just going to play have a little exercise. Who's doing a day doctorate at the moment? Who's currently at the beginning of their journey? Any first-year doctoral students around? Zanele, are you a first-year doctoral student?
I'm doing my third year.
Third year, okay. Zanele, let's try this out, even though it's third year, but you can reflect on your first year. So so this is a really nice tool that I borrowed from the University of Otago, and my colleagues, they're doing some really good work on expectations. And one of the things that we actually looking at is student supervisor expectations. So this is what I want to do. So Zanele, with regards to, let's start with the second question. Is the supervisor responsible to develop a research topic? So I'm going to ask you to give a response, and then I'll ask Janine to give a response as a supervisor. You're going to wear the student hat. And basically, if you agree with the statement on the left, so for example, if you agree with it is the student's responsibility to develop a research topic, you'll then tell me I choose number 1. Whilst if you agree with the candidate is responsible for developing his or her topic, you'll choose number 5. Or if you think that this should be both the responsibility of the student and the supervisor, you'll tell me number 3. So let's take, Janine, you go first. What is your response as a supervisor to number 2?
So for me, it's a bit of a tough one. I do think that the candidate is responsible for developing his own topic, but it also goes hand in hand with the supervisor's guidance regarding that topic. So it's, I guess it's more a 4 than a 3.
Okay. Thanks for that, and thanks for sharing that. Zanele, do you agree? What's your number as a doctoral student? Who's responsible?
Are we still on number one? Under
Number
startup?
two. Is the supervisor responsible to develop a research topic?
Okay,
Or do
and
you
then on those scores, one is agree or is disagree.
agree with that statement?
5 is strongly disagree.
Yes.
Is 5.
Yes. So you choose 5.
Yes, I strongly disagree.
Okay. Share with us your reason.
Because I believe that the research on its own, it's something that you learn as you do it. So if the supervisor does it for me, when am I going to learn? I take this journey as my chance to learn.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. So before we actually comment on that, I see a hand is up. And the Kushle? Did you want to say something? Okay, I can't hear you. You are muted. Sorry, I'm not sure why I'm not able to hear you. Can anybody else hear?
No.
And the Canele? No? Okay, sorry, and the Canele, maybe you can just add in the chat. I'm not sure why we're not able to hear you. Okay, now you are muted. Okay, but maybe you can try again. I'll be happy to hear your thoughts. Okay, who agrees with what Zanele said, that it's purely the responsibility of the student to develop the research topic, whilst we have the supervisor saying it's actually both?
Hi, I agree that it's the student that has to develop their own research topic. However, maybe the supervisor can actually help to refine that, or, yes. I think though it's solely the candidate that's responsible. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. So I should also share that it's not like we're looking for the perfect answer here, right? But the idea of this exercise is to give us some thoughts and about the expectations of the student and the supervisor. So that's what I'm doing with you here, is that, but I also want to share this with you, that yes, of course, we want to develop the student, but I agree with the fact that this is actually, the student comes up with the research topic, but it has to be something that the supervisor is also in agreement with. Because as you would find when we discuss the contract a bit more in detail later on, it is very critical for the supervisor to have buy-in into what the topic is, and also to have expertise in that area. So yes, of course, it's driven by the student, but it's actually, I would agree with this one, that it's a joint process. Right? So let's do number 3. The supervisor decides which theoretical framework or methodology is most appropriate. And then if you agree with that, Zanele, it would be a 1, but if you disagree, it would be a 5, whilst the opposite is the candidate should decide which theoretical framework or methodology they wish to use. So who decides on the theoretical framework and the methodology to be used in a project?
Maybe to be safe, let me choose.
No, Zanele, go, share. Okay.
Yeah,
but
let me choose 4, because I agree with what the lady just said now. But my point was, it should be 60% my work, and then the supervisor is just there to make sure that I'm on the right track.
Okay, Lenine?
So for me, this is also a both. I like to encourage students to go forth and figure it out for themselves, and then discuss with me before we begin what sort of framework or methodology you'd like to pursue. And we'd go through that together. We decide on the best course of action together, but they should have that experience of being able to work through it themselves. And I'll be there to guide the direction.
Okay, sure. Okay, great, thank you. So that was a bit of an easy one. How about number 4? The supervisor should develop an appropriate program and timetable of research and study for the candidate. And then the opposing is the supervisor should leave developing the program of study to the candidate. Zanele, are you playing it safe again?
This time is 3.
3. So you think
Yeah,
it's both?
This time is 3 because this is a critical part of the research project. So the supervisor can't leave it totally to me. He must be there.
Okay. And Lenine?
For me, I would agree. This is integral to the effective communication that we should have. So we both play key roles in developing the timetable for this.
Okay, great. Okay, that's great. That's fantastic. Anybody has any differing views, please let us know. Raise your hand or share. This is great. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which I actually am very eager to see the responses to this one. The university or supervisor the university or the supervisor is, yes, a representative of the university, is responsible for ensuring that the student is introduced to the relevant services and facilities in the department and the university. So Nelly, do you agree or disagree with that?
I'm still trying to read on the right.
Okay, and then the right is, it is the candidate's or the student's responsibility to ensure that he or she has located and accessed all relevant services and facilities for research.
No, it is 3 again, because it's much better if it's the supervisor introducing me, because he already knows relevant places.
Okay, Lenine,
So
I'm really
I say 3.
Okay, Lenine, I'm intrigued to hear your answer.
So I'm more of a 4 in this case. I think it's very important for the supervisor to be aware of these different support systems for a student, absolutely. But I also feel that a student should be able to be independent enough to be able to find these on their own as well.
Yes, and I have to agree with your colleagues. So for example, Daniela, as you were saying that it's a 3, right? I also am more in agreement with Lenine that it is, yes, the introduction might be the case, but as supervisors, you are expecting the student to do, because remember, we're viewing each of our candidates as being adult learners. So you've actually got to go and also look to see what resources are available, etc. Like out of curiosity, right? How many of you are attending this session because your supervisor asked you to attend the session? Or for example, okay, not this session, but all of this Doctoral Academy sessions, or is it that the supervisor sent you a message and said, I think this is good? Or did you actually see the message yourself? Is anybody attending because the supervisor asked them to attend? Oh, that's nice. I can see that there are some people. Is that a hand up, or are you agreeing that or you indicating that your supervisor asked you to attend?
It's a hand to say yes. It's my supervisor who recommended the sessions.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Anybody else? That was recommended by the supervisor. I'm trying to look at the participants and I can't see any more. So that means everybody else actually is attending because they've come across this on their own, which is great, because that's what we're expecting our doctoral students to find resources that they're going to find helpful, and then they can attend these sessions to strengthen their skills. Okay, great. So Zanele, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to swap this around now. I'm going to swap you and Lenine around. So Lenine, you are the student, Zanele, you're the supervisor. So the question is, the supervisor should insist on regular meetings with the candidate. So Lenine, as a student, do you agree or disagree with that? Whilst the opposing end is, the candidate should decide when she or he wants to meet with the supervisor.
So with my student hat on, I think that this would be a both. I would like, as a student, to be able to go to my supervisor and say, look, yeah, we need to have a chat about this. But also as a supervisor, I think they should also be able to do the same. So this is a 3 for me.
Okay. Zanele?
For me, it's a 4.
The candidate should decide when he or she wants to meet with the supervisor. Okay, so this is actually a very important point. So I'd love to hear more voices in the room. How many of you agree with Zanele that this is more that the candidate, that this statement of view, it's the student that should decide when he or she wants to meet with the supervisor? Anybody wants to share their views on this? Yes, Aniki?
I disagree that it should be like a unilateral thing. So to me, it should be a joint venture. So both the supervisor and the student should mutually draw up a schedule, if you like, of how often they meet, like what I do with my supervisor. She checks on me, I check on her. From time to time, depending on the phases where we are at with the protocol, I can reach out to her, she can reach out to me. So it's a mutual thing, and I think it should be that way.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, Aniki. Okay, so Aniki, I'm going to actually make you the person who answers the next question as well. So let's see. The next one is the supervisor should check regularly that the candidate is working consistently and on task. Do you agree or disagree with that? Or do you feel that the candidate should work independently and not have to account for how and where time is spent? Now, I want you to bear in mind that we're talking about a doctoral relationship.
I agree that the supervisor should be checking regularly, and that is what she does with me. So she checks regularly, and like I said, with us it's mutual. So I also make sure that whatever is going on, I update on her. Like right now, the phase that I'm at the IRB stage, and it's been pretty slow from my end. So I keep on like giving her updates as to where I am at. And she also does the same. So from the beginning, from year one, I'm in year 2 right now. From year 1, that is how we've been relating with my supervisor.
Okay, okay. Samuel, thank you for that, Aniki. Samuel? I can't hear you, Samuel.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear now?
Oh, perfect. Yes, I can hear you now. Wonderful.
Good.
Thanks, Samuel.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree that the supervisor should check regularly that the candidate is working on his tasks. But in the case that the supervisor is not doing that, how would the supervisor align or probably call the supervisor to help to check on his or her work? I want to find out from you. That's my view for now.
Okay, I didn't get the last part, Samuel. Sorry, just repeat the last bit for us again.
I said I agree that the supervisor should check regularly on the candidates to see how the work is going on. But now, my question now to this is that in the case that the supervisor is not doing that, how will that be reconciled? That's my question.
How will that be? Sorry, that's the part I didn't get. How will that be?
How will it be reconciled if the supervisor is not checking on the students?
Oh, how will it be reconciled if the supervisor does not check up on the student?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Before I give you a response, anybody else wants to take a response to this? Oh, who agrees or rather disagrees with this? Monica?
Yes, I strongly agree that the supervisor should be checking you from time to time. For instance, my supervisor demands that you give him a monthly progress report, and it's been helping me a lot. Yeah.
All right. Okay, thanks for that, Monica. Shamila, I'm really intrigued with your thinking. Share with us, because I agree with you that this is a tough one.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a different understanding, because I would think at this level, doctoral level, the student should be a little bit more independently working. They should be owning what they're doing. I'm going to fall more on the shoe of the supervisor now, although I'm not. I think supervisors have the equal share of students, and I think it's as a student you need to fight for your time. Not really fight. I'm saying the wrong word, but get the time, but lead in what you need to be doing, and then just like drop in every now and again according to your timetable with your supervisor and keep them updated as to what you're doing. Sorry, I'm a little bit different thinking from the responses so far. So yeah, that's just the way I'm thinking.
No, that's fine, Shamila. I actually think that there might be more people thinking like Shamila. Anybody else agree with Shamila? that actually we should be treating our doctoral students as adult learners who will control their time, but obviously the student and supervisor will agree on the rough timelines, but the supervisor will not be checking in on a doctoral student weekly or monthly for that matter to see where how they're doing or where they are. Okay, Zanella agrees with that. Anybody else?
I also agree with that.
Okay, so just to give you an example then, that, you know, for example, can you see how expectations of as a student and as a supervisor, how this differs? So the question that was asked is, how do we reconcile this? So I'm thinking that what you want to know is that what's the middle ground with this situation? And the middle ground would be that the supervisor and the student does agree on an overall timeline of what things are going to happen, you know, during the course of the study and in the different years, etc. But on a weekly basis and on a monthly basis, there isn't an expectation for a doctoral supervisor to check in on the student and say, hey, what have you been up to? It's the opposite. The student should actually be actually checking, you know, informing the supervisor. But I do agree that if a supervisor has not heard from a student for lengthy periods of time, it is actually a courteous thing to do for the supervisor to check in. But remember my starting slide with you is that it was critical for me to make it very clear to you that supervision is different from mentorship. So, and we agreed that supervisors can mentor, but not all supervisors are mentors. So bear that in mind when you're thinking about your expectation. Okay, let's try a couple more. Okay, number 10, the supervisor is responsible for arranging ethical approval. That's on one end. On the extreme, it is a responsibility of the candidate to arrange ethical approval. So, Shamila, which one would you choose? Would you agree with the supervisor being responsible for sorting out ethics? So would your response be a 1 or a 5?
I'm going to play it safe. Like, I think it's a mutual thing there, because the student should be, again, I'm being hard on the student for myself, chasing up the ethical approval, but obviously working with the supervisor at the same goal. They know the technicalities in terms of, you know, they've done this with students before, so just learning the ropes from them. But it should be the student that would learn more and try and get on board with getting that done. That's just my take on it. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. And I see that, Rio, you also agree with this, that yes, indeed, that the supervisor should indeed share with the student the way in which this can be done and advise on the preparation of the ethics application, etc., and all of that. But I will share with you a bit later on, based on the UKZN contract, I'll give you a heads up, it's the student's responsibility to submit the ethics application. So yes, you work with your student to develop your proposal and the ethics application, but the onus of submission is purely on the student. So much so that a supervisor, irrespective of how much they really want to go the extra mile, etc., on that for you, on the system doesn't actually allow for a supervisor to submit it. So just to share that with you, and I'll share with you a bit more about that. Okay, so let's see. Okay, number 12. The supervisor should enroll the candidate. Now, listen carefully. The supervisor should enroll the candidate. Hello? The supervisor should enroll the candidate. Now, listen carefully. The supervisor should enroll the candidate. Okay, sorry, somebody else has got a device on. Please, can you just mute? There's a bit of relay on the sound. Okay, so the supervisor should enroll the candidate in courses that develop the candidate's ability to enhance their thesis. Example, academic writing and presentation. So if you agree with that, that's a number 1. If you disagree, then it is the responsibility of the candidate to enroll in courses that develop their ability to enhance their thesis. Example, academic writing and presentation, you will choose a 5. So how many people are choosing a 1? Michelle, Scott? What do you feel?
I'd choose a 5 there for doctoral candidate.
Mitchell, sorry about that. I said the name wrong.
That's
Mitchell.
fine.
Yes, sorry,
No problem.
Mitchell. Yeah.
I'm an error. No, don't worry. I would say number 5, that it's the candidate's responsibility at doctoral level. He should have ironed all this out at master's level already.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. How many of you, anybody in the house disagrees with Mitchell? Okay, it seems like we're getting a thumbs up. And yes, indeed. Okay, we have Samuel, you got your hand up?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I am agreeing that supervisors should enroll the candidates on courses that develop his ability, because as a supervisor, he has went through the trend or the ladder of that particular program that the supervisor is doing, and you should understand or know those things that can enhance the supervisor's task. So he should be able to guide or advise the candidates on some of the academic courses that will enhance the research work. So that's my view.
Okay, so Samuel's actually given us a very different take from Mitchell, right? And Samuel is basically saying that it's actually the supervisor's responsibility to develop the candidate because they know what's required and what's needed, and therefore they should be the one that should be enrolling the student on the courses. Anybody wants to share wants to respond to Samuel?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No. Oh, thank you. You see, I've been struggling with my mic. So that I have to shift, I have to kind of change the laptop I've been using. Now, sorry,
no
I'm
problem.
just going to
Welcome.
talk about break.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to quickly talk about submitting the protocol for ethics committee, because I had some problems with it. That
Okay.
you know, after the protocol was ready and it's been accepted, my supervisor asked me to prepare it for break. You know, that's biomedical ethics research committee. So I didn't actually know what to do, because when I did that, the last time I did that was in 2017 when I was having my master's, and things have really changed. So I expected him to tell me what to do, because I had to wait. So I waited for like 2 weeks. So when there was no response was when I now got back to him that what do I do, because
all right,
you know, so
I'm just gonna
guide us.
Okay,
That's what I'm going to. We should be guided. We're doing this thing for the first time.
Okay, great.
You know?
I agree with you that you should be 100% guided. I'm going to come back to this point of here a little bit later on in the presentation, and I'm going to show you how to avoid that problem. But I agree with you that your supervisor should actually share with you how to do it and help you prepare it. But I will share with you how you can empower yourself and take that further in terms of the submission. Is that okay? I'll come back to you with that, right?
Actually, I've done that. It's been done. It's sorted.
Okay.
I'm just telling you my experience.
Sure. But thank you for sharing that, and I agree with you that we should actually know exactly what we need to do. Okay, so very quickly, coming back to Zanelia's point, where the supervisor must enroll the candidates in courses. So colleagues, this is what I want to share with you, Samuel, is that yes, a supervisor is aware of the skills and the competencies that a doctoral student should have or should develop during the course of the doctoral journey, and they can suggest that you attend certain courses when they recognize that you need to develop your skills in a certain area, etc. However, your development as a doctoral student is also very dependent on yourself. So you actually should be also looking out to see what are the different courses, etc., that I can look out to enhance and develop my skills and competencies as a doctoral student. So yes, it's not a one-sided thing. There can be definitely some support from the supervisors, but because of the fact that at a doctoral level, we are looking at our students as adult learners, you drive also your learning goals and your learning development with support from your supervisor. Okay, let's look at the last stage. So here's number 13. A supportive relationship between supervisor and candidate is important for successful candidature or for successful graduation, let's say. And then if you agree with that, it's a number 1. If you disagree, it's a 5. And on the other hand, a supportive relationship is inadvisable as it may obstruct objectivity for both candidate and supervisor during candidature. Anybody chooses a 5 for number 13, so on this side. a supportive relationship between supervisor and candidate is important for successful candidature. In other words, you disagree with that and you agree with the fact that it may influence the objectivity of the relationship. Okay, we have ones. Okay, we have lots of ones. Has anybody had a difficulty in the supervision relationship where you had such a nice supervisor, but you just had really great difficulty in terms of their supervision effectiveness or their deadlines, and you had difficulties then bringing this up with them because they just were such a nice person? Did
I
anybody
just
have
want
that?
to find out, sorry. So when you say a supportive relationship, are you meaning that the nice, just in terms of the relationship itself, without necessarily chasing deadlines? Maybe more clarity on what is meant by supportive relationship thing.
Okay, all right. So I actually, I'm not going to clarify that, but let me explain to you why. Because this is what is important also in part of the dialogue between the student and the supervisor. So for example, the very fact that we may view the word supportive relationship as being different is critical for you to understand, what does your supervisor understand when they say, I'm going to support you in this journey? And then vice versa, what do they interpret as when you say to them, I'd like to have a supportive relationship in this? So for example, a supportive relationship might just be somebody who's just checking if you're okay, are you fine, are you doing okay? And that kind of thing, they consider that to be supportive, or, as opposed to actually asking you any specific details and giving you constructive feedback about drafts that you may submit, etc. So it could be on two different levels. So that is why this is not such, initially everybody said it's a one, that yes, of course, a supportive relationship is important, but it's also important for you to recognize that in addition to it being a supportive relationship, it needs to ensure that it is a professional relationship that is also dependent on you meeting your outcomes and achieving your milestones in your doctoral journey. And not just where you meet for coffee every month and you just have a good laugh about things to catch up on life, and not necessarily about the doctoral journey. So you need to guide that relationship. Okay, so in the final stages, number 14, the supervisor should insist on seeing all drafts of work to ensure that the candidate is on the right track. So if you agree with that statement, you'll choose 1. On the other hand, if you believe that the candidates should submit drafts of work only when they want constructive criticism from the supervisor, you will choose 5. So what would you choose, 1 or 5? Okay, we have some 1s, we have some 2s. Yes, you're allowed to choose the numbers in between. I was giving you the extremes. Okay. Lenine, what did you say about this?
So this is also a both for me, but more the candidate, more towards the 5, so maybe a 4. I think that the candidate should be responsible for submitting work when they want that criticism. It shows that they actually do want to be involved in this process, rather than the supervisor consistently insisting that this has to happen right now. But also a candidate shouldn't just rock up at a supervisor's door and say, I want this done now. That should be a discussion, an agreement between the candidate and the supervisor about how to do this, how to review work between them. So okay. 4 for me.
Okay, thank you. So Mambo, I'm intrigued. Tell us why you chose a 1.
The way the previous speaker now, her tone made me nervous. Yeah,
it's okay. Share me. No, it's fine. Share me your initial thinking.
So my initial thinking was that really it's about that supportive relationship. Maybe we're talking about on point 13, that you actually, maybe the word insist might be a bit too strong, but you sort of want to track that the candidate is still on the right track. And, you know, and also you want to correct things as they arise, rather than, you know, later on when so much work is accumulated. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so the important thing to recognize in this here is that if you're going to send a supervisor a half-baked draft, then when that supervisor gives you feedback that's really going to seem like as though they're being really harsh or critical, then you must be aware that you that they don't know that you've actually given incomplete work. So that's also a very important thing to be aware of. When you are sharing your drafts, what are you expecting? Are you just wanting to your supervisor? Are you sending an email saying, can you just check to see if I am on the right lines, but I will send you a final draft. So you can actually dictate how your supervisor gives you feedback on that process. So some of my students will say, I just want to know if I'm applying this correctly. Am I interpreting this correctly? And then, you know, I will give them just a very quick overview of what I think about it, as opposed to please see attached draft for your critique and your feedback on this matter. Then that means I get to interrogate it in detail and give them detailed feedback. So do you see how it can work both ways in terms of how you, of what you want? And more importantly, what I'm trying to highlight, colleagues, is that it's important about your expectations. So this whole process, what I've done is that showing you that in a student supervisor agreement, your expectations between student and supervisor you know, should be very clear. And if it's unclear, then it's important for you to negotiate that during at the beginning of the relationship, but also bear in mind, you can come back to this whenever you want to. So there's no such a thing as that I have to develop this at the beginning of the relationship, and then after that, this is now, you know, we're stuck with it. Not at all. You're welcome to negotiate the timelines, etc., around your expectations of the supervision along the way. So in the last bit of the session, and the time has just flown by, is what I'm going to go through what exactly is the UKZN contract. But colleagues, I'm aware that there are students here from other institutions, but there will be similar contracts in place for you at your institution. So for example, at UKZN, the contract is divided into responsibilities by the postgrad student and responsibilities of the supervisor. And you will sign this document, like I said, and submit it with your ethics application. So here in this contract, it's based on the minimum expectations, and it starts off by highlighting that a student should identify the research topic. And the reason why we are recommending that, or the university is recommending that, is so that the student is doing work in an area that they are interested in. However, there will be cases where supervisors may suggest an area, and if the students like it, and that's also their passion, they may work in that area. So this is just a guide to protect the student's interest. It is also an expectation that the student must submit a full proposal within 3 months of submitting or registering. But we do understand that life happens, so negotiate with your supervisors if you require more time. In terms of the submission process, I did agree to share with you more information. On the university website, particularly the research university website, there's a host of resources. It is the student's responsibility to visit all of these different resources and read about the protocol and the ethics application and what it is about, how to register on it. And to help you out, there are videos there as well in terms of how to actually submit your ethics application, etc. What I also recommend to you that if you're working in your protocol and you go onto the site, there's the templates here, the BREC and the SHREC. There's 2 different ethics committees we have, right? One is the biomedical and the other is the human and social sciences. Download these templates so that you can actually use these templates to develop your protocols, and then after that, it becomes easier for you to copy and paste into the ethics application. Bear in mind that your protocols are a lot more extensive than, for example, what the BREC application asks you for, but the format is very much similar. Okay, these are just some more information that you will find on the site. Okay. It is important for the student to produce work that is their best effort for comments by the supervisor. This is again a reminder about our discussion. If you're going to submit half-baked drafts, you're going to get heavily critiqued, and then that may not go down well with you. So do not submit a draft, and while you're working, while you're waiting for the supervisor to give you feedback, you suddenly realize, oh, I actually have not looked at all of the recent literature, etc. And then you now suddenly say, after the supervisor has started working and giving you feedback on a copy, by the way, can you just give me, I've updated it. Try not to do that. Rather submit your work when you are ready, that you want to get critique on it and that you have given it your best shot. There should actually be an agreement that the student and supervisor should meet at least once a month. And nowadays, most of that happens online. It is very critical for the student. Note, the responsibility is for the student to actually summarize or make notes of the discussions and the decisions that are taken at these meetings, and for them to retain a record. This is really critical, because when you come to say, my supervisor hasn't done this, this, and this, and I want to now change my supervisor, this becomes very critical. But also, if you want to submit your work and you think you are ready for this and your supervisor says no, then this also becomes really important. So it is very important for you to be aware of it. But also, other than the fact that you want to resolve conflicts that may arise, it is also important for you to bear in mind of the decisions that you collectively make, so that you do not work on perhaps a wrong avenue or take spend time on something that you both had not agreed on. The student must demonstrate, this is really important, and this is the student's responsibility, the highest level of scientific honesty. It is really critical for you to be aware of this at all the different stages of the development of your proposal, right up to the submission of your thesis. And it is really important for students to be aware of the plagiarism and postgraduate policies. And I'll show you, for example, what you have to do. Okay, this point of view, before I show you the declaration of the plagiarism, this last point is that if there at some point or the other, your supervisor is advising you on something and you disagree, it is really critical for you to discuss this with your supervisor. Remember our exercise about expectations. All along the way, if you want to maintain a good relationship with your supervisor, it is important to ensure that you both have got similar expectations, or that you clarify any misconceptions. And if you disagree with your supervisor and you feel you cannot discuss it there and then, take some time, but do discuss it. So in terms of the declaration, I want you to be aware of this, is that this is a declaration that you will sign with each of your theses. When you sign this, you are declaring that you have not plagiarized anything and that you are familiar with the policy. If an examiner comes back and says, this student has plagiarized, that can be the end of it. There will be no point in saying, let's give the student an opportunity to discuss this and clarify, etc. No, plagiarism is a serious offense. And so therefore, from the very beginning, be aware of this, right? And I'm sure there must have been sessions around that actually unpack more about plagiarism. So this is a declaration that you sign that goes with your thesis, so that is making it very clear that you are aware of it. And what are some of the other responsibilities in the contract? It is critical for you to inform your supervisor about your whereabouts. You cannot go MIA for a couple of months and then suddenly pitch up and send a draft and then expect the student or the supervisor to give you feedback within a week or two. If you are not going to be around, as we said, life happens, it is critical to keep your supervisor updated. It is also your responsibility as the student to keep updated with the literature and to share this with your supervisor. Remember, we have discussed this in some previous sessions. You ultimately eventually become the person who leads the development perhaps of a particular content or the subject matter, because you are actually going to, in some ways or the other, overtake your supervisor. Not in some ways, actually students do in terms of a content area, because you are reading a lot more than the supervisor has on updated literature and work in the field. So when you come across that, especially works that you know are going to influence the way you change or you write your methodology or your theoretical framework, share with your supervisor for two reasons. You're keeping them updated, but also it makes it easier then to dialogue and to have meetings with them when you want to discuss this further. It is also part of the responsibility of the student to agree to complete their studies within the timelines. But like we said, we understand that things happen, but it's just important for students to recognize that it is your responsibility to ensure that for the period that you're meant to be registered for a degree, you complete your work. If you do not publish your work within a year after completing your study, then the supervisor is allowed to publish your work. But yes, of course, the student will be co-author, but not necessarily the main author, because the supervisor is now submitting the work because you have not done it. All right, so very quickly, what are the responsibilities of the supervisor? So the supervisor must, of course, make themselves available for the regular meetings. And if they are not around, they should identify a co-supervisor to assist if it's for a long period of time. But also on the idea of co-supervision, they should also bring on board a co-supervisor or a co-investigator if they feel that the project has developed in such a way that we would actually like to have expertise in a specific area that are maybe, the supervisor is not so au fait with, and they bring on board that. But here again, I must share with you, if that is the case, be aware that the supervisor and the co-supervisor, you must make this clear that they have got to ensure that there isn't a clash of ideas that you are receiving from the both of them and that you are caught up in between. It is critical for supervisors and supervisors to thrash out differences so that you don't get caught up in it. Supervisors must indeed give students constructive critical work, and we recommend that they, at least within a month, 3 weeks to a month, that they must give students feedback. They must be supportive of the student at all stages in terms of settling down the proposal writing all the way up to the submission of the thesis. And yes, of course, we're expecting our supervisors to be sensitive to the overall well-being of the student. But like I said to you, that can differ from supervisor to supervisor. And of course, we spoke about the knowledge area. The supervisor must indeed be interested in the work that the student is working in. And I spoke to you about the co-supervision to avoid confusion and differences of opinions. Supervisors actually should also, where possible, ensure that they attract funding and grants, etc., that will support these students to present a paper at a national or an international conference. And feel free as a student to also share with your supervisors, if you come across an application, you're welcome to ask them to submit or to apply for that on your behalf so that you can actually have that as part of your training. Supervisors actually are required to submit an annual progress report to the research office. These progress reports, by the way, and the final report regarding how much of assistance a student required during the course of the doctoral journey is also submitted with your thesis to the examiners, so that people get an idea, so that the examiners can also get an idea of how much of work the supervisor and the student have put in together. Supervisors must protect the work of the student, and this is really important, by not prematurely publishing the work or assigning similar work to another student. If this is the case, please discuss this with your postgraduate, the academic head of research, the dean, or in your respective institutions, because this is really important, and I do not want any student to experience this. I've been through it, and it's not a nice process to go through. It is absolutely important for students to know that they will be first author of their work in anything that is published, and also this is really important. You have a right to know why people's names are being added to your work if they have not worked with you. And if they have not been a part of your project, they have not been a part of your supervision team, then no, your supervisor cannot just add somebody's name to your work. Okay, so just lastly, what I want to share with you is that is the last bit in terms of your responsibility. Students must submit an intent to submit before you submit your thesis, but we will cover this in a lot more detail when we're doing the examination process. But just to let you know that after you submit, you intend to submit 3 months prior to submitting your thesis, your supervisor's responsibility is to identify examiners. It is not your responsibility to have anything to do with the examination process. What you can actually have an input in is whether you strongly don't want somebody to supervise your work. So that's where it mostly comes in. So if there is a problem in terms of conflict, you can then bring on board the dean or the academic leader of research or the college dean if your supervisor is the dean. And then, either they would resolve the matter or they'll bring in a senior academic from the school, and whatever decision is made will be final. So you do have that recourse if there are issues. Okay, so I'm going to skip this feedback expectation tool. We'll do it in another session, and I'm actually going to stop sharing and open up the floor if you have any questions or do you need any clarity. But the idea of today's session is to, one, give you an idea about how expectations can vary between students and supervisor and why the agreement is important. And then I shared with you the contract that you would sign with your student and with your supervisor when you're submitting your ethics application. So I hope this was helpful. Aniki, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Aviana. Yes, I just want some clarity on one point in one of the slides where you mentioned that if a student wants to publish publish the papers after graduation. So my question is, the PhD program that I'm pursuing, I was made to understand that is PhD by publication. So which means I cannot graduate before I have published, and I think it's about 3 papers. So I just want some clarity on that. So which is which?
Okay, so Aniki, I was talking about, for example, when you complete your project and you submitted your thesis, you submitted your work by thesis, not by publication, right? So many students will submit their work as a thesis, and then the supervisor will say, let's publish, but the student doesn't actually work on developing a draft or a manuscript for a journal. So after a year, if the student has not responded and does not publish the work, then the supervisor is allowed to publish the work. That is the circumstances, yeah, not the one that you're talking about.
Oh, okay, got it, thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, great. Any other questions or queries before we round off the session, or does anybody else want to add anything?
Sorry, thanks so much for the great talk. Really, what is the role of the co-supervisor?
Okay, so a co-supervisor comes in to add expertise to the project, right? So a supervisor will be overall in charge, and the co-supervisor perhaps has got a specific expertise. Maybe it's a mixed method study and your supervisor is very good with quantitative data analysis, and they'll say, okay, fine, I'm not very good at this. I'm going to bring in a co-supervisor who will oversee the qualitative data analysis, as an example. So that's when you bring in a co-supervisor, and then that co-supervisor works with you overall. But your supervisor is the person that's overall in charge of your work and who will make the major decisions for your study. But you may actually end up having a better relationship sometimes with a co-supervisor, but you need to be aware of, as a student, that actually you need to ensure that your supervisor is kept abreast of all the decisions being made of the project. And that is the reason why I say to students that when you bring on a co-supervisor, please share the reasons as to why you want, because I want the students to be able to have the opportunity to dialogue with their supervisors while we bring on a co-supervisor. Sometimes not in the doctoral journey, but in the other degrees and the coursework masters, we bring on a co-supervisor if we find the supervisor has not got enough adequate supervision. But a doctoral supervisor must meet the requirements of having a doctorate and have adequate supervision experience. Does that help you, Samaba?
Yeah, it helps a lot. Thank you so much.
All right,
thanks.
Pleasure. Zanele, your hand is up.
Thank you so much. Mine is not a question. I actually wanted to emphasize more on what you just explained, and with examples maybe. For instance, both when I was doing my master's and now that I'm doing my PhD, I was registered with a particular university, but the whole data collection part was done at the experimental farm because I'm doing farming. So the co-supervisor actually did 80% of the work because the co-supervisor was based at the experimental farm. The supervisor was just checking the draft. So sometimes you find that the one who's called the co-supervisor end up doing 80% of the work. Hence, we need a co-supervisor.
Okay, I'm glad that worked out well, Daniela. Sometimes that may not, but I'm glad that that worked out well and there was no conflict there. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else has any thoughts or last minute questions or comments before we end up? No? Okay, great. All right, thank you very much, everybody. I'm glad that thank you very much for the kind comments in the chat, and I'm glad that you found the session to be helpful. Good luck with your journeys, research, masters and doctoral. All the best. Take care.
Thank you, Via. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.